Thank you for joining me on 13 Plus. I'm Cali Lichter, and this is On the Docket, a weekly recap of crime and court in and around the state of Michigan. This week, we hear from the Kent County prosecutor on his decision not to charge Wyoming police officers in an officer-involved shooting that turned fatal. And we take you into the courtroom for 2 drunk driving fatal accident sentencings. All that and more is on the docket. The officers involved in a deadly police shooting in Wyoming will not be charged. It happened around a month ago at the time of this taping. Police were called to a home on Lemira Street on what was initially reported as a case of trespassing. It eventually ended with officers firing their weapons at a man inside the home. But we learned those shots are not what killed him. Kent County prosecutor Chris Becker held a news conference on October 14th, saying it was not the officer's bullets that killed Luis Sandoval. It was actually a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Hurry up, por favor, please. Please, he has a gun.
The Kent County prosecutor will not be charging the Wyoming police officers involved in a September officer-involved shooting that turned deadly, but not at the hands of the officers. Police responded to a 911 call at 1 a.m. on September 16th, with the caller saying her niece's estranged husband, Luis Sandoval, had broken into the house, was throwing things and firing his gun. What you're seeing now is body camera footage of the incident.
He's looking for my niece.
Okay.
Hurry up, please.
Prosecutor Chris Becker says Sandoval had lived at the Lemira Street home up until a week prior, when he and his wife separated. She had just gotten papers for a personal protection order that day, but it had not been filled out.
There's concerns of domestic violence prior.
But Becker says they do not know what compelled Sandoval to go to the house then or a few hours earlier when he tried typing in the door code and left. The family did report it online, but did not request follow-up. When he returned, he was more violent, forcing his way into the house by knocking out the door window with bullets and accessing the lock from inside.
Yes, he's in the house. Please hurry up.
Okay, do you see the gun?
Did he just shoot?
The 911 caller was panicked as Sandoval made his way through the house, yelling, "Show me where she is at," in reference to his wife, who was hiding upstairs. You can hear the shots from the officers at the end of the call.
My kid's having
When officers arrived, some of the more than 10 people in the house were able to get out before officers shot at Sandoval. But those shots did not kill him. They wouldn't have even been fatal.
Essentially what killed Mr. Sandoval there was a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
Becker says the officers were justified in their use of force by self-defense or in defense of others, saying Sandoval posed a risk to them and the bystanders inside.
Who knows what would have happened to the rest of the individuals in that home had the police not arrived and acted in the way they did.
October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, with Becker saying this is an example of how domestic violence can turn deadly. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, we have resources right now on our website, 13onyourside.com. After that press conference, Becker also announced a man is in custody and charged in connection with the Christmas Eve 2023 crash. Fernando Ocampo Aguilar is in custody and charged in the death of Kathy Lee Hernandez. She died in a crash on US 131 near 54th Street in the early morning hours of Christmas Eve 2023. At the time, Michigan State Police said speed, foggy conditions, and possibly drugs or alcohol played a role in the crash that threw both Ocampo Aguilar and Hernandez from the car. The Kent County prosecutor authorized charges against Ocampo Aguilar, and he was picked up on an arrest warrant that was issued last month. Ocampo Aguilar has been released on bond, but was lodged in the Allegan County Jail. He is set to be arraigned on another holiday, Halloween. Our Lauren Baker spoke to the victim's family. April Guerra says her cousin Kathy Hernandez would light up any room she walked in and always wanted happiness around her. Now, after she was killed in a crash on US 131 on Christmas Eve, she says her family will stop at nothing to make sure everyone knows who Kathy was.
When talking about her cousin, Kathy Hernandez, it's hard for April Guerra to not get emotional.
She was, I was trying not to cry.
She was a great person.
The two grew up states away but always had a great relationship. When they got older, the two got closer, and Guerrero was able to watch her cousin become a mom.
She was a phenomenal mom. I feel like she would forget sometimes that she was a great mom.
So on Christmas Eve in 2023, when Guerrero was at work and was told people were trying to contact her,
I got onto my phone and I had messages from her side of the family, just like, hey, can you call me? Is something with Kathy?
she says she never thought she would hear the news she was told.
I hopped on a phone call and all I heard was, Kathy's gone. The thought of, like, how could she, what are you talking about?
Hernandez was killed in a crash on US 131 near 54th Street.
All I could think was, she's only 24 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her, 2 little kids.
The family left grieving for answers would have to wait nearly 2 years before someone was charged. On Tuesday, Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker announced Fernanda Ocampo Aguilar was charged with several charges, including second-degree murder and operating while intoxicated, causing death.
It took a long time to get. There's basically DNA that we're obtaining for the scene that had to go through that process.
Even with the charges announced, Guerrero says it doesn't change the fact that her cousin is gone.
It's never going to be enough. She had her whole life to see the world.
That's why she says she and her family will continue to tell the world who Hernandez was.
She always made light out of anything. Anything that she touched, anything that she came across, she just made it better.
Next on the docket, we go into a Kent County courtroom for the sentencing of Justin Armstrong. Why the judge believes nothing she says will make anyone feel better. On October 15th, 30-year-old Justin Armstrong was sentenced to a minimum of a decade in prison for killing his girlfriend in a fatal December 2024 crash where he hit a tree and ejected 34-year-old Erica Werner. Armstrong's BAC was 1.5 times the legal limit. He pleaded no contest to operating under the influence of liquor, OUIL. His second-degree murder charge was dropped. We were in the courtroom where her family emotionally confronted Armstrong.
My name is Jerry Matthew Salo. I'd just like to say that as Erica's husband, our marriage might have not been the greatest. Everyone certainly has their opinion on whether or not I should even be here or not. But I loved my wife every single day with everything I had. And to this day, I still sit there and would like to message her, and I can't. And since then, I've also reached out to the parents of her kids. And ultimately, I have a lot of things that I could say about my experiences with Justin and the things that I've dealt with. But nothing is more damaging than knowing the fact that her kids do not have the opportunity at a second chance with her. They don't get to repair their life because he made choices. He chose to do the drugs. He chose to do the alcohol. He chose to drive at the speeds he chose to drive at. It wasn't an accident. He made a series of choices, and any one of those choices could have caused the accident, the wreck. And her kids don't get a chance. So, granted, yeah, there's a conviction. He's going to do some time. But no way do I think justice has been served. Definitely not for her kids. And that's all I have to say.
My name is Courtney Klein. I was Erica's little sister. For starters, this is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. Being here and having to speak about my sister in the past tense is something that I've never imagined. Erica was the type of person that could light up any room just by walking in. She was brave, courageous. She was the most selfless person to ever exist. She would go above and beyond for the people that she loved, and losing her so suddenly and so abrupt, our whole world had shattered. It's been 290 days since we've lost her. A night where the world stood still, where everything went dark. It's been a year, first month after we had to celebrate her birthday without her. Holidays coming up, we still have to celebrate without her, and it's been almost a year. The pain that weighs on my family is consistent and it's constant, and there's not a day that goes by where she's not thought of or she's talked about. Receiving the phone call that I did, hearing the news, feeling the utter shock through my body. It was one decision, one wrong decision. At the moment it seemed fun. It was her escape, it was her reality. She was who she was as a person. Knowing she found peace in some of the things that she did, but also knowing that one wrong decision, one wrong move, being irresponsible, it cost us in the end. And not only did we lose somebody as well, but now the choices that were made, 2 children have to go on, their father locked up behind bars for a prolonged period of time because the right decision wasn't made.
I think that Ms. Klein's correct, that this is a tragedy all around. I think 2 families' lives are going to be changed forever now. Both Mr. Armstrong, his children, as she said, are not going to see their father for an extended period of time. And the same thing for Ms. Warner, that her children are never going to see her again. So I think she was correct in that this is tragic all around. And I think Mr. Armstrong does recognize that. He is very remorseful, he is very contrite. I know that there's nothing I can say here today that's going to change the outcome. This is predetermined as part of the sentencing agreement we had as a compromise in this case. It's something that I did discuss with Mr. Armstrong at length before we came in. The guidelines are what I expected, so we did know that before coming in today, that the agreed upon sentence was likely going to be above the top end of those guidelines. I think Attorney Heckman might have had him scored a little bit differently, but we did know that coming into today, so I think Mr. Armstrong is just ready to move forward. So I would just ask the court to follow the sentencing agreement, Your Honor.
Yes, if I may. I'm sorry to you guys and your kids. That's all I gotta say.
And as I said before, I did read the letter that you wrote, and I'm sure that there's nothing that that I can say that would make anyone feel any better. I'm sure whatever sentence, not whatever sentence, but the sentence that you'd agreed upon is not going to make anyone feel any better. This whole series of events, series of choices, resulted in an inexplicable tragedy. And while I appreciate, I don't know how the family feels about you saying that you're sorry. I appreciate you saying that, but I can also see where those words would just fall flat. Because saying you're sorry at this juncture obviously is not going to heal any wounds. It's probably not really going to help. I mean, it may be at least he said he's sorry type of situation, as opposed to helping anyone move forward. Obviously, losing someone so abruptly and so suddenly and so unexpectedly that you talk to all the time, that you see all the time, it's your girlfriend, you're with her, you're hanging out with her, you're enjoying her time. And I speak with individuals all the time that have drunk driving offenses, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them that don't result in this type of scenario. Yours did. That's just how it happened for you. Having said all of that, again, there's no words that I can say that will help. This is just another step in the process towards healing, which I hope happens for you, Mr. Armstrong, and I also hope happens for Erica's family, because obviously she was a remarkable young woman who was loved by many people.
Armstrong will spend 10 to 15 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections with credit for 223 days served. That is outside of his 43 to 86-month guideline. However, Judge Christina Mims says that was influenced because of the murder charge. Next on the docket, we go a few counties over to Clinton County for another drunk driving crash sentencing. Ashley Monroe was drunk and pregnant when she ran over a dozen family members walking on the road, killing 2 and changing several lives forever. A mid-Michigan woman who caused a crash that killed 2 people and injured several others from the same family will spend decades in prison. One by one, survivors, family members describe the emotional and physical pain they are now forced to endure. I was in court for the highly emotional, nearly 2.5-hour sentencing where Ashley Monroe was silently sobbing for most of the time from the defense table. Although you can watch the full sentencing on our website and YouTube, 13 on your side, there was one thing I didn't get to go into during my story on air, and that was the victim testimony, the full almost hour and a half. But before we get into that, what is this case about? Monroe pleaded no contest to 8 counts of operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury, and 1 count of second-degree murder. She'll spend 30 to 60 years in prison. Monroe was driving drunk over twice the legal limit and pregnant in May 2024 when she ran into a family walking back from a park in Clinton County. It killed 2 men, injured 14 others. She then drove off. The 2 men were dead at the scene, 30-year-old Jonathan Esch, who once lived in Grand Haven, and 42-year-old Daniel Harris from Grand Ledge. Like I was saying, I didn't get to go much into that hour-and-a-half victim impact statement, but that is at the core of this case. 2 dead, 14 injured, so many lives changed. Brothers, wives, mothers, children. So for this sentencing breakdown, I'm pulling a few parts from the 10 victim impact statements, because it can be so easy to see something like a car crash on the news and forget about it, but it will stay with the victims forever.
My name is Jennifer. I am the mother of Annabelle and Eloise, daughter of Carolyn, aunt to Madeline and Mackenzie, cousin to Jessica, Dan, Aurora, Gabriel, Henry, Ivan, David, Monica, and Daisy, and Jonathan and Erica. A walk I've taken more times than I can count, to a park that holds more memories than I can do justice. Our place of magic became a place of chaos, destruction, and death due to Miss Monroe's reckless and selfish choices. I was separated from my daughters for nearly 10 weeks. I had lost the use of 3 of my limbs, lost all of my independence, and my bodily autonomy. I too was served a sentence that day. I became a prisoner first to my hospital bed, then a prisoner to my body, and now a prisoner to pain. Only my sentence was forced upon me by no fault of my own, and it's a sentence I'll carry for life without the possibility of parole in 30 years. And more than anything, I hope to never think of you again, though I fear that will be hard to do because my body is littered with the scars you forced upon me.
Your Honor, I'm Carolyn Potts. I'm one of the many family members who are victims of Miss Monroe's crime. This crime has caused me psychological and emotional injury, which for me has been more painful than the physical injuries. The sadness, confusion, anger, and grief have been huge. How couldn't it be anything but horrible? One moment, I was enjoying time with 16 other family members at a favorite place since my childhood, and within seconds, Miss Monroe's actions caused this mass casualty and the deaths of John and Dan. It is grief of their deaths. It is the trauma of what I did see, hear, and experience on the Hill, and the flashbacks of that. I will forever miss my nephews. Our lives are forever changed. Every day, we live with the losses and the damages of this tragedy.
Andrew Tiefel. As this court is aware, our brother and his brother-in-law were murdered by the defendant sitting in this courtroom. We refuse to use this murderer's name because once this court gives the sentence, the defendant will have the same significance in our lives as that of its own family. First, we must impress upon this court that it was John's coworkers and brothers of Local 2258 who responded to the murder scene and attended to John's family. His brothers kept their composure as John and John's brother-in-law, Dan, lay deceased in their direct line of sight. The fire department was also significantly impacted because we were robbed of John's presence, expertise, and love of patients. John was with us for 3 years and 10 months. During this time, he made his presence known by the lives he saved, fires that he fought, and his unyielding empathy and support for those who suffered from mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, and the like. See, last night I asked one of my brothers if the statement was a little bit too much. And he said, "Is that a joke? She willfully got behind a wheel and murdered 2 people and left the scene hoping not to get found and not take responsibility. She ruined generations of beautiful people who lost what John would have given them. This, can't say it, tore a family and a fire department apart and deserves to rot."
Ashley, this date marks the end of your power over our healing and will be the last time I have to think about you for at least the next 30 years. As we read our statements today, I ask you to remember this. While you may feel a flicker of empathy for a moment, maybe even a few days, these are the realities we are sentenced to live with every single day for the rest of our lives because of what you have done. My husband was everything to me. He wasn't just my partner, he was also my best friend, my future. He was an incredible musician, a talented cook, and had the biggest heart, especially when it came to animals. He often spent hours out exploring the woods with our dog, dressed in matching bandanas. They would overturn rocks and stumps, looking for mushrooms and cool bugs. Our dog absolutely adored John. They were each other's best friends. After John's passing, our dog would still run to the window at the sound of the garage door, tail wagging, waiting for his dad to come home so they could go on one more adventure. Because of you, Ashley, he never did. Working in the medical field myself, I know good people can make horrible mistakes. I can understand and empathize with someone who has made a mistake. But Ashley, this was not a mistake. This was a series of selfish, deliberate choices. You chose to drink while pregnant. You chose to drive. And perhaps most vile of all, you chose to run over an entire family and then flee. You hit us and kept going. You didn't check if anyone was alive. You didn't call for help. You left John, you left Dan, and you left my family in your wreckage. I'm haunted every single day by the memories of that moment. At night when I try to fall asleep, I relive it all. The screams of children, their pleading voices asking me to tell them it wasn't real. I see my sister-in-law with terror in her eyes, trying to perform CPR despite her own injuries. I feel my throat getting dry from screaming John's name. Again and again, hoping that if I screamed loud enough, he might wake up, but he never did. The days are no easier. I live with daily flashbacks. I feel the broken pieces of my leg grinding together, just like they did when I used my arm as a splint that day. Sometimes I think I see John in a crowd, and then just as quickly, I see his face lying lifeless in the morgue. This is the reality you've created for me. These are just a few of the haunting memories I'm left to carry, but you, Ashley, don't have to. You had the privilege of driving away. We didn't. No amount of alcohol can justify abandoning people you just mutilated or murdered. This was not intoxication, this was inhumanity. Ashley, you made me a 28-year-old widow. In a bed John and I once shared, I wake up alone. In a home once filled with his laughter, I come home to silence.
My name is Dee Esch, and I am the mother of Jonathan Esch and mother-in-law to Dan Harris. Mother to Jessica Harris, grandmother to Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan. Mother to David Esch, mother-in-law to Monica Fabrice, and grandmother to Daisy Esch. And I am also the mother-in-law to Erica Glatz. I am also a sister-in-law, an aunt, a great-aunt to others that were involved in this crash. The crash that caused the deaths of John and Dan. Jonathan was only 30 years old when you killed him, Ashley. Oh, not killed him, you murdered him. Let's get that straight. He had only been married to his wife Erica for 5 months. They planned on having children. Ashley, because of you, I don't get those grandchildren. Because of you, Ashley, I don't get any more Christmases, Thanksgivings, birthdays, no more holidays, period. I miss Jonathan's smile. I miss Jonathan's laugh. I miss his hugs. I miss him stopping over for a hug. I miss the sound of his voice just saying, "Hi, Mama," and "I love you, Mama." Because of you, Ashley, I will never hear "it's a boy" or "it's a girl, Mama." Ashley, because of you, all I can do is dream about Jonathan. And in those dreams, all I can do is try and hug him, and every time he turns and disappears. Ashley Monroe, you are a murderer. You murdered my son Jonathan by your willful disregard for human life. You knew it could happen when you drove drunk, but you didn't care. You didn't even care about the life you grew inside you. You drank alcohol, put the keys in your car, and drove until you were stopped. But only after you irrevocably changed my family's life forever. Make no mistake, what you did was murder. You are a murderer. One day you will walk out of prison. My sentence only ends when I meet my son in heaven. Now I'd like to talk about Daniel Harris. Caused all of this that day that you decided to drink and drive. Dan Harris was a warm, loving, caring, funny person. Dan was an excellent husband and friend to my daughter Jessica, and an excellent pops to his children, Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan, and an amazing son-in-law to me. Dan was only 42 years old when you murdered him. Dan was an extremely likable person you could talk to about anything. He was always there to listen, never too busy to lend a hand, and always ready with a great hug. Dan was a talented artist, both with a pen and a guitar. Dan and Jessica were looking forward to life in their new home. Ashley Monroe, on May 18, 2024, you murdered Dan Harris. Once again, you drank alcohol, put the keys in the car, and started it and drove drunk. Make no mistake, again, this was murder. You are a murderer. Now I'd like to talk about my daughter, Jessica Harris. When I first saw Jessica, she was being brought up over the guardrail on a gurney, covered in blood from head to toe. She ended up on life support for 3 days. It was at least 1 month before Jessica came home the first time. Finally, in February of 2025, they had to amputate her leg from mid-knee down. It's been extremely difficult watching her learn to walk again and suffering from the phantom pain. But she is a strong, independent woman, and she will persevere. Ashley, you also injured my grandchildren. Aurora, 16, had 8 stitches in her upper thigh and a severe concussion. Henry, 7 years old, had a concussion. And Ivan, 3 years old, had a fractured hip and scrapes all over his face. Gabe, 14, was walking ahead of the group and turned around to witness Miss Monroe driving away from this crash with her hand over her mouth. This has also impacted my son David and David Esch and his wife Monica and their daughter Daisy. Physically, David broke a rib and Monica hurt her tailbone and her nose. Luckily, Daisy only had a few scrapes and bruises. Mentally, David now suffers from PTSD, nightmares, and survivor's guilt. Monica suffers from nightmares, and Daisy also suffers from nightmares. David, Monica, and Daisy were on their way to moving to Germany, and that had to be put on hold for a while we had the funerals for Jonathan and Dan. What should have been an exciting time began with, and still is, filled with anxiety, nightmares, and misplaced guilt.
My name is Monica Fabies. I am mom to Daisy, wife to David. I'm a proud military veteran with a long career in national security. My mission in life has always been to protect those around me and to serve my community. 2 concepts that are clearly lost on Miss Monroe. I am one of Miss Monroe's victims, and for a long time I wanted to look Miss Monroe in the eye, to be face to face for the first time since she hit us. But I understand now that closure cannot be found in crocodile tears. Still, I am here to explain some of the damage she has inflicted in hopes of eliciting any morsel of remorse. My daughter Daisy was only 2 years old when Miss Monroe drove into us. In the aftermath, I began to notice signs of PTSD in my child. to illustrate how absolutely ludicrous that reality was. Understand that we sought out and were turned away from pediatric mental health care providers who stated she was simply too young to treat. This was not some freak accident. This was hundreds of Miss Monroe's choices that culminated in what turned out to be the worst day of my life. I understand that Miss Monroe is a mother herself. I strongly believe, as one mother to another, that there is no maternal bone in Miss Monroe's body. Because if there were, she would never have acted so recklessly. I also believe there is no humanity in this woman. To be as selfish as she has been for so long, I believe with every fiber of my being that she would do it again. Because of this, I believe Miss Monroe has no place in society. She is a proven danger, and we must protect our most vulnerable from people like her.
My name is David Esch. I am a dad, a husband, a brother, a son, a cousin, a nephew, and an uncle to an amazing extended family, many of whom are in the courtroom today, and some of whom are no longer with us. I didn't know what to do. I was disoriented, confused, and scared. So I started coaching myself. The first thing I said was, stand up, find John. John will know what to do. He can tell you what to do so that you can help. I turned around and I saw my little brother splayed out in the grass, lying still. I couldn't even go check on him. I assumed he was dead, but I couldn't bring myself to check. Didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the impact of the car. I heard Monica's yelp. I felt the vibrations in my entire body, and I heard the sound. I heard the screams. I saw Dan as he was beginning to pass. That feeling of powerlessness, knowing that a stranger can come along at any moment and do that to your family. I walked away feeling immensely guilty. My family was gathered that day to say goodbye to me and my wife and my kid because we were getting ready to move to Germany. I know it doesn't make sense for me to feel responsible for what happened, but I think it's just the reality of this experience. They were there because of me. I am beyond tired of carrying the guilt and trauma inflicted on me that day. This has been an open wound for a long time, and I'm choosing now to move on.
I am Lucy Harris, mother of Daniel Harris, who was killed on May 18th, 2024. The call I received that Dan is dead still echoes in my head. How can my Danny, my third son, my baby boy, be gone, leaving a hole in my heart and the hearts of George, Danny's pop, and his brothers, Ash and Andy, and all our family. Danny died, his wife Jessica critically injured, injuries that required her leg to be amputated. From a day of fun and happiness for them to tragedy and misery because of the senseless act of a person who chose to drink and drive. Jessica's mom, Dee, and I both lost our baby boys, young men, loving husbands, Danny, a wonderful father, fatherhood and John's future, all taken away. And finally, I did not see my son close his eyes or hear his last faint sigh. I only heard that he was gone. Too late to say goodbye.
My name is Aurora Harris. I am 17 years old, and I was 16 when we were hit. I was Dan Harris's daughter. I called him Pop. I was also John Esch's niece. He was my uncle on my mom's side. And I was one of the people hit by Miss Monroe. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground on my back. I remember hearing my Aunt Monica telling me not to move, though I was still pretty out of it. I remember everything hurting. I even remember the feel of the grass against my injuries. One of my first thoughts when I heard the words "we'd been hit" was, did we get hit by a bomb? because I'd somehow ended up flat at my back at the bottom of the hill. On that note, there were a lot of things I wanted my pop to be able to see and do with me. If and when I were to ever get married, I wanted him to walk me down the aisle. I wanted him to be there at my high school graduation, right at the front where he could see me. I wanted him to see me go through college and law school to become a lawyer, and if I ever had kids, I wanted to see him be the best grandpa to them. Because I know he would have been amazing. But I'll never get any of that. I could never be walked down the aisle by my dad. I could never see him at my graduation. I can never tell him how he helped me to push myself to become an incredible person, and I'll never get to see him become a grandpa. This was stolen from me. All because Miss Monroe couldn't call an Uber or have her friend drive her home. Due to the combined trauma of being hit by a car and losing my dad and uncle, I have developed severe depression and anxiety that has impacted my day-to-day life. I barely draw once or twice a month, if at all, compared to my weekly, at the very least, drawing before. I hardly read at all now, even with an entire shelf of books that I love. I can't listen to certain songs that remind me of my pop or Uncle John without crying. I can't watch certain anime without breaking down due to the fact that I used to talk with my Uncle John about them. I don't miss worrying about whether my mom was going to lose her leg or even her life. I don't miss having no actual stability, and I certainly don't miss having to try and play mom to my little brothers in her absence. In short, I miss my pop, I miss my Uncle John, and I miss my old life. I wish Miss Monroe had just called an Uber or a friend or her boyfriend to drive her home instead of choosing to drive while drunk.
My name is Jessica Harris. On May 18th, 2024, I was a wife to Dan, big sissy to John, mom to Aurora, Gabe, Henry, and Ivan, sister, aunt, cousin, and niece to others hurt that day. Today, my life looks very different. I may look healthy and strong standing before you, but inside I'm falling to pieces. I miss my husband and little brother every minute of every day. It feels like there's a black hole in my chest that could swallow me up at any moment. And I haven't even really started the grief process. In fact, writing my victim statement and preparing to read it has been exceptionally difficult. It's almost impossible to put into words the amount of pain that one person's choice has caused. I'm no longer a wife to Dan. I'm a widow. I'm no longer a sister to John. I'm bereaved. I'm no longer a happy, normal woman. I'm an amputee, and I will never be able to live a normal life again. Never. The biggest point that I would like to leave this court with today is that we had no choice in what happened to us on May 18th, 2024. Miss Monroe did. This was no accident, as it was 100% preventable.
She was originally charged with 2 counts of operating while intoxicated causing death, 2 counts of failure to stop at the scene of an accident when at fault causing death, 6 counts of operating while intoxicated causing serious injury, and 1 count of failure to stop at the scene of an accident resulting in serious impairment or death. As part of the plea deal, the prosecution and defense agreed to a Killebrew agreement. That's a conditional guilty plea in Michigan where the defendant pleads guilty or no contest based on a specific sentence agreed upon by the prosecutor and defense attorney. The Killebrew agreement stipulated that the sentence for each count will be served concurrently or at the same time, with a minimum of 30 years to be served in prison. The judge sentenced Monroe to that 30 to 60 years in MDOC, and she cannot have any contact with the victims, their schools, places of employment, or residences, and must stay 500 feet away from those places and those people. She chose not to speak at her sentencing, which is her right. Thanks for joining me on this episode of On the Docket on 13+. We have new episodes releasing every week, taking you into the courtroom for the latest updates and deep dives on crime in and around West Michigan. In the meantime, we'll bring you the latest on crime in court, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. When breaking news affects you and your community, we stream live on 13+ with what you need to know right when you need to know. We'll see you next time with updates on What's on the Docket.